Ho 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 and everything. I have to make an announcement. There is an update for my ADSR plugin and you should download it again because it became cooler. First of all, there are bug fixes, and second of all, there is a new feature. So first I will tell you about the bug fixes. Bug fix number 1. When the plugin window has just been instantiated, sometimes the decay and release link button wasn't in the right state. So it looked like it was linked, but it wasn't, or the other way around. That is fixed now, as you can see. Bug fix number 2. I programmed the tempo sync parameters completely wrong. I don't know why I didn't notice, but they just had the wrong times, and now they actually have the right times. So you can now use the tempo sync mode faithfully. Now let's actually start talking about the new feature. You can see a new button here, which is the look ahead button. And what it does is it compensates for the attack time. That can be useful in multiple different kinds of scenarios, which I will tell you now about. But first of all, I want you to listen to the beat so that you know more about the context of the music that I will present you my techniques in now. Now I will be talking only about the drums group, and from the drums I only want to talk about the kick and bass group. So as you can see, the kick and bass group consists of the kick track and the bass track. And the oscilloscope is being set up to just show what's going on the kick and bass group. If you look on the oscilloscope, you can see the signal looks very clean and it also sounds very clean. That is not for no reason. I go on both of these tracks now and disable the ADSR plugin. And you can see it looks much more rumbly and it also sounds like that. So you might wonder why. So let's just check out what the plugin instances are doing here. The kick drum sample initially is much longer than when I dial in ADSR. The reason for that is that the decay is just 1/8 note long, and then the release is also 1/8 note long. But it has an opposite curve in the way it is falling. It just shapes the tail of the kick to be a little smoother. The kick just by itself, of course it sounds best without the plugin. But when you're making music where multiple elements can clash with each other, like in this case a bass line, it can make sense to just make room for the other elements. But this doesn't showcase the new feature yet. Now let's look at the bassline instance. The bassline is just a tone that goes on forever. It changes very slightly because there is some unison in the background, but it's more or less the same all the time. So let's check out what ADSR is doing here. As you can see, it adds sort of a fade in and also a fade out just before the kick comes. And that is because of my new look ahead feature. It can see that a kick is about to come and then it starts to fade. How do you set up a setting like this, you might ask, in the new version of my plugin? Let's start from scratch and you can see ADSR. So let's make a very simple setting for now. We enable the tempo sync mode, then we put this to 0. We make sure that look ahead is currently turned on and not off. Then we just do this on maybe like a 32th note or something. And sustain is on 0. And this should now give us a very unnatural clicky sound that is triggered by the kick. That makes sense even though we are on the bass track, because I put a note receiver here which is like sending the MIDI from the kick into ADSR. That is how it would be done in other DAWs. So now if we want there to be a fade in on the 1 of the beat, we have to dial in a little bit of attack. Now you can see, instead of having this bulk of bassline here, we now have a fade in into the 1, but we lost what was here. The reason for that is because we still have the same length of stuff that is being played, but it was shifted to the left and is now in attack state. So if we want to get something back, we have to dial in the release a bit more. As you can see, now we created a signal that has a similar shape to the kick. And if we now want the bass line to have the inverted signal, we just have to click on the flip envelope button. And from that moment on, we will have a suitable pumping curve. Now we can just tweak the settings. This one looks cool. This setting might be even better than the one that I had before. I'm not sure yet which one I will use for this track, but for now I will just use the setting that I already had so that it just works with the rest of the mix. Now here's another example of the same technique, basically, where I'm inverting the envelope in order to make a pumping curve together with the kick input. This is a track where I have two sampler instances with a percussive sound, and I used Bufix Humanized module to humanize the timing a little bit. I also used Note Grid to just make some crazy noise, and then I low pass that noise, and that low pass noise determines the pitch of the MIDI. So that's why the percussion is kind of moving around like crazy. By putting one of these to the left side and the other one to the right side, we get a signal that is very wide and playful. Then I also used diopter to make the transient sound a little bit more like scissors. You should have called this plugin scissors. It tries to be something that is a disperser alternative, but I think most of the time I'm using this, it really sounds like scissors. You can use it on hi-hats and then you get instant scissors flavor, and even this sound, you can kind of hear the scissorsy flavor. Anyway, the cool thing about this instance of ADSR is it gets ducked by the kick, but because of the randomness of the timing of the scissorsy percussion, you sometimes get a that comes right before the kick and sometimes you don't. So it gives you a bit more of a fluid motion into your beat, which is just making it a bit more natural and fun to listen to. You know what I mean? I also used ADSR on the chords G group also to pump with the kick, because, well, that is just what it does. You know, the cool thing about this technique compared to stuff like LFO tool and so on is that this is not an LFO but an envelope, so it really triggers only on the kick. You could use a different kick rhythm, something that is not a 4 to the floor beat, or something that changes throughout the project, and it would still pick up these changes just like a Sidechain Compressor would, and that's why it's useful and not a toy. Now I want to show you something different that you can do with ADSR now that it has look ahead. I will also take this track and instantiate ADSR on it. Oh, by the way, whenever this little red rectangle shows up, it means that your attack time exceeds the maximum latency of the plugin, which means that it cannot compensate for that correctly. That is a little bit of an indication for that if you want to use look ahead, you should stay in the realms that are possible. And if you use higher values, then it's your own fault when it sounds a bit weird. I didn't want the plugin to have like a second of latency or something, because that feels a little bit weird in the DAW. So I decided against that, just by the way. So now we have look ahead enabled and we try to stay in the range that we can. And now we make a staccato type of curve. Of course, it doesn't do anything now because we are on the chords G and not on chords MIDI. So let's get the notes from chords MIDI to chords G. And now I actually made something that just fades the note in on itself, basically, because chords G consists of a sound that has these staccato motions on it, but it also has an instrument on it that just plays long notes sustained. So now I imposed more of the staccato feel on the entire thing on top of the group of everything, which just helps with the dynamics of the entire music a little bit, if you are dialing it in very softly with dry wet. I could actually imagine making a little modulation to full blast. It starts on the full-on staccato and then it goes into the super wide and carrying sound. course, you have to be a little bit careful with automations now that the plugin has look ahead, because it also means that automations are being registered a bit earlier. I think in this case it would make sense to put it here so that it goes on more around here. Yeah, more or less like this. I think this needs some tweaks. But anyway, I think the idea comes across. Look ahead is nice. More ADSR envelope plugins and plugins with ADSR envelopes should have look ahead, because obviously you can use it for different things that are just pretty nice. Now this plugin does have it, which is cool. So I hope you are enjoying my little Christmas present or whatever you are celebrating at the moment.